Okay, we're still waiting for some people. I figure we just start 4:15 now, my time. Thank you all for joining me. I'm just glad to talk to Gary firsthand. Some of you, the names I've seen before, Jason's, Lindsay Ann for sure. But I mean, there's a lot to talk about. I mean, there's a lot of things happening. I'm sure all of you, many of you have followed this whole Bob Ruff situation, so called in large quotes, truth and justice, unquote. And, maybe we can start off with something. What would you like to talk about, Gary?
Well, I think Adam Galvin suggested we dispel some of the myths that surround the case, particularly the myths of black T-shirts and Metallica and Damien and Jason being sort of arbitrarily picked out of a crowd just because they were a little different than the rest of the kids. As you know, the documentaries contain virtually none of the really, really negative information that's on the record about Damien with his mental health problems, his blood drinking, and et cetera, et cetera. And I just think it's good, and not that makes him guilty of murder, but it indicates why he became, part of the reason they became interested in him is because he had this violent history. Right. And there were factors that quickly came to play in that, but that's not the only reason. But it had nothing to do with black T-shirts and nothing to do with Metallica.
And turtles.
That didn't come through very well.
Yeah, Lindsay, your pinging is what you're doing.
Yeah, no, well, it's good that you bring up that point, Gary, because if you talk to people local, and the local scene there is good, as good as anybody else in this case, is that during that era of 1993, all the kids wore metal shirts, or there's a significant proportion of those people wearing Metallica, Iron Maiden shirts or whatever. So it's kind of silly to think that they were the only one in that part of town, mid to lower class town, that we're wearing this kind of scrappy teenage T-shirts. I think that's definitely a myth that should be permanently dispelled from anybody's communication in this case. So.
Well, yes, and they were not far from a large town where it was you see all sorts of things all the time, and they had many tourists coming through that area that were wearing all sorts of travelers, tourists who were wearing all sorts of garb all the time, and nobody really, it would take something pretty outlandish to draw a lot of staring or a lot of police attention just from what you were wearing. The idea that Jason, who really looked just about like any other kid you could find in Lakeshore Trailer Park, from what I've seen, what I remember, what I understand, he didn't look that much different than many of the other kids, and he's the one who consistently throws out this myth that the police were picking on him for these reasons, rather than the fact that Damien had been sighted walking away from the scene in muddy clothes, which raised a lot of early suspicions, and then he had this disastrous interview with the police the day after that tip came in, and where he
failed the lie detector test, right?
Yeah, he failed the lie detector test, and basically said a lot of things that made him sound like he was a viable suspect, and he effectively became a person of interest at that point. Before that, they were just checking out a list of potential people, and there were many other people that were checked out, and who passed, cleared all the hurdles, and it
right. And that's another thing you're dispensing with. It is the so-called Damien Echols tunnel vision they brought up in court, right?
Yes, exactly. He was a primary suspect after perhaps the first 2 weeks or so, partially because they had not just, in addition to the Hollingsworth sightings and his own actions and behaviors, but he had people that there were people who were coming forward who were saying that Damien had told them things that made them suspicious about his potential role. And, there were people who were, they had people like L.G. Hollingsworth and Deanna Holcomb who failed the one question on there on the polygraph that they failed was, do you know who did this? And they both failed that question. And the question was, they said their explanation was that they knew Damien had done it, though neither one of them had any concrete proof, but they knew him well enough, and both of them knew him very well, that they were convinced that he had done it. And they weren't the only people, but they knew him very, very well.
Right. Well, Deanna was his former girlfriend at some point, right?
Yeah, oh, yes. Prior to they broke up in May 1992.
Gotcha. So it was a year ago, and she was the one that in the court records drew that depiction of child sacrifice, some baby around a bunch of tombstones in front of a full moon. Very cold charged, which nobody ever really wants to talk about. Yeah. Nobody on the reporter side.
She had said, and I know some people don't really get into the occult connections here, and you and I share some views that are similar on this, but she had said that she practiced black magic and that Damien practiced black magic, and honestly, a lot of the initiation that he had into these magical practices came through her. According to what I understand, he says he has a different description of this, and maybe he had some passing interest in it, but he got very serious when he hooked up with her.
Right, and she said that they would say publicly that they were into white magic, even though they were in black magic, right? Do you remember that part of it?
Right. Or Damien said he was into gray magic.
Right. So that's another kind of myth, like these guys are, purely Wiccans or whatever.
Right.
So that's, tunnel vision is a myth. Black clothes is a myth. No occult influence, myth, even before May 5th, 1993.
Right.
What other myth?
On June 2nd, speaking of the tunnel vision, on June 2nd, Aaron Hutchinson was shown a lineup of photos of people that were at least potential suspects or persons of interest. And this was the day before Jesse Miskelly confessed, and there were 6 people there, 6 photos. He shown none of them was a photo of Damien Eccles or Jason Baldwin.
Interesting.
So that laid into the investigation before the arrest. They were still looking at many other people. Not many other, but they had a list of people.
There was still. We know that because there's a long video of the police doing a surveillance at the skating rink. Right? And so they know they saw Damien Eccles is in that, and also Jesse Miskelly. So that also kind of dispels this other myth that they didn't know each other. That visual shows that they're in the same kind of environment at the same time. Miskelly and Eccles, right?
Right. Yes. And there's there's a lot of evidence to suggest that Jesse knew Damien well enough to introduce Damien to Vicki Hutchison, and you can believe whatever you want to about the interactions there, but they definitely did meet each other, and they had some sort of interaction at some point, and that was through the agency of Jesse Miskelly, because he was very well acquainted with Damien. Jesse was also described by Deanna Holcomb as being somebody who hung out with Damien. She's somebody who was close to him. She was the love of his life and his girlfriend and all this. And so they all knew each other. Jason and Jesse had been friends since they both lived in the same trailer park from maybe the 5th and 6th grade or even younger. So they knew each other very well.
Gotcha. Well, another myth we can dispense with is a myth that's propounded by John Douglas of the FBI, that these guys didn't have a criminal history before, they were arrested on June 3rd, 1993. You recall anything? The reason I bring that up is because you mentioned the name Deanna Holcomb. It was because of his Eccles' relationship with Holcomb that first charge was, right? I mean, didn't they get busted in a trailer?
Yes, they got busted in a trailer. I don't want to monopolize the whole conversation here, but they got busted in a trailer, and that then Eccles was taken into custody, and she was taken into custody. He threatened suicide, so they sent him to Charter Lakeside in Little Rock, and that was his first trip to mental hospital that year. He ended up back at he was placed into custody again at St. Vincent's in Portland after a lot of different stories about this, all from the same ridiculous sources, which is Joe Hutchinson, his father, and his mother, who couldn't ever tell the same story straight twice in a row, and described these violent threats he was making. He was going to cut his mother's throat. He was going to eat his father with a spoon. He had knives in his room, which suddenly turned into spoons later.
Right.
Spoon stirring chocolate, but originally Joe Hutchinson had said he had these knives. And then in September he came back to Arkansas without violating his probation. He was put into custody, and he attempted to drink blood from this other kid at the facility in Jonesboro. So they sent him again to the hospital in Charter, and all along it was well documented his preoccupation with violence, with threats, with he was bragging about drinking blood and talking about how he gained godlike powers through the drinking of blood, which the psychiatrist at trial described as very disturbing, and it's pretty unusual. And then so there was all that, plus he had this history of bragging to his friends, in one case he killed this dog, this Great Dane, in a famous instance. And this was something that was brought forward by Jason's cousin. It wasn't some sort of prosecution witness. It was Jason's cousin who described Damien beating this dog to death and then and harvesting its skin and skull. And he also, Chris Luttrell described Damien telling him about the animals he tortured, that Damien had tortured. And so there's all this history of torture and violence with him.
But the dog evidence is also consistent with Jesse's confession, because he said that they tortured dogs and hated them.
And Jason was involved in a lot less that we on record, but according to his own school papers, he had, he violently he basically choked his little brother out in a violent confrontation. And according to Mara Leverett's dark spell, he took a baseball bat to his drunken stepfather one evening and ran him out of the house. So he had a history of violence, and it was a very violent household, apparently, from what he has told his favorite author.
Right. Didn't he have a record of stealing stuff, too?
Yeah, shoplifting and vandalism. He'd been in trouble for both those things. Jesse Misskelley had been in trouble on several different occasions for beating up really smaller children, girls. I mean, beating up 8-year-old girls, 10-year-old girls, hitting them with bricks, sticks, rocks, etc. And he had a long, long history of violent acting out as a child. He hadn't killed anybody up to that point, but he was extremely violent, and his family, it was a very violent household, apparently.
Yeah, he had a reputation for brawling, right?
Brawling and fighting, and yes.
And this is what John Douglas wrote in his book. Damien and Jason had no indicative violence in their past. This is like one of their people, so
I know
it's laughable. It's just a total. I mean, and then I wrote St. Dibblebus said Eccles tried to scratch his eyes out. Laura Maxwell, Eccles threatened to kill her brother and her parents. Charter Hospital, his own mother was most concerned about son not learning to deal with anger and rages. So in terms of threatening, that was another thing that was important that the West Memphis Police stated, is that he was involved in terroristic threatening was one of the charges in that arrest in '92, right?
Right. He'd threatened to kill Deanna's parents.
Yeah.
He'd threatened to kill her new boyfriend and put his head in the front lawn. He threatened to kill Shane Divelbiss's, I keep mispronouncing his name. Divelbiss's cousin. He was going to kill him. I'm not sure why exactly, but he threatened him. And, there was a long list of people he'd made these kinds of threats to. It's totally unreasonable to suggest he had no history of violence when, in fact, it's well documented that he had quite a history of violence.
Right. So certainly, that's another myth, right? That's the. What's the other myth? How about the Jesse Miss Kelly has the mind of a 6-year-old myth? I mean, we know that he's scored. There was at least one IQ score that had him at an 88, and it was known that he was babysitting somebody else's kids, right? So it would be hard to believe that somebody would let him babysit kids if he was really younger in his mental age than the children he was babysitting. Does that make sense?
Yes. His verbal IQ was pretty low, but his performance IQ on previous testing before the trial came up was pretty high in the mid to upper 80s, which is almost, it's in the normal range. It's kind of a little bit low. And that means if you're good at mechanical, putting things together and taking things apart and understanding how things work, you're just not, what he was not adept at was academic subjects at all. His reading was at a very low level, though he had some reading. And, he's not a smart kid, but he tested very, very high on the scale for malingering on these other tests they'd given in preparation for trial, which indicated that he was fudging the results of the test. And that's just the sort of thing he would be inclined to do, which shows a little cunning on his part, which is not something you really associate with somebody who has the mind of a small child.
Right. You can see also in his confession on June 3rd, 1993, that he was kind of prevaricating. He was distorting facts, and which he admitted later, too. So it shows, the capacity to, prevaricate, deceive, right? I mean, do you agree?
Yes.
Any other myths that we can address? What about the myth that the cops only looked at Damien Echols? I mean, we know from the records that they took a bunch. The court records are correct. I mean, the police records are correct. They took at least 20 or 30 men who were like local pedophiles, sex offenders, criminals, and took them out of a list of possible perpetrators, right? I mean, did you see that in your research, Gary?
Yes. In fact, Randy Sanders, who was one of the family friends of the Eccles-Hutchison family, was a registered sex offender, and he was one of the people that the police checked out. Just as an example, they did a very thorough job with that. They thought because of the way the boys died, there might be a Vietnam veteran involved, and they went down a list of local veterans that they might have some concern with. They talked to all sorts of other people, all the local kids that were involved in,
Right, violence. They did a house-to-house kind of survey too, didn't they? If I remember in the records, there was evidence they went and talked to everybody locally. Is that true? Did you see that?
Well, I think Bob Ruff has a point in that they did do a pretty thorough survey of the neighborhood around Todd Moore and Christopher Byers' houses, but they didn't really go far enough. They didn't really do much of a survey down in the Hobbs area, Branch, Stevie Branch's home. So he's some valid criticism there. The police their investigation was far from perfect, but they did go to around and knocked on a lot of doors at the Mayfair apartments to see if anybody had said anything. There were some people who were acting suspiciously in Mayfair Apartments, which was right across the bayou from the woods, and they investigated them, subjected some of them to polygraph testing and so on and so forth. So there was a lot of that going on. They weren't just sitting back and saying they've got their man with Damien Eccles 3 days out and not looking at anybody else. Far from it. They did something like 70 polygraph tests, and they used polygraphs to weed out potential suspects. One of the problems for the West Memphis Three is Jason never cooperated at all with the police, which raised suspicions because they he's entitled to do that, but it does raise suspicions. Why would you not want to clear yourself if you had nothing to do with this? And he made no effort to do that whatsoever. And the other two killers both failed polygraph tests. So just, wasn't admissible in court. People can argue about the results and all that. But when it's one of those things that you look at the totality of the evidence, and the polygraph testing suddenly becomes very important.
Right.
And
it's a good point.
Jesse confessed to Buddy Lucas the day after the murders. When Lucas was tested on the polygraph concerning this, the polygraph indicated that he had been telling the truth about this. The same thing is true for Ken Watkins. When he was tested, he had originally told one story. He, like a lot of these people, he told various stories, but he eventually said that Eccles, he failed the polygraph test, and he gave a story about how Eccles had confessed to him 2 days after the killings.
Yeah. And there's a video of that confession, the first one you were talking about, right? Didn't they videotape that? Or he's talking about Jesse giving him the dirty shoes?
Yes, yeah, Buddy Lucas. Yeah, there's a
video
of that. Yeah. And there's a transcript. There's a transcript of that, but it's the video's instructive. You can see that Buddy Lucas is obviously not much more intelligent than Jesse Misskelley.
Yeah.
And the truth is Jesse Misskelley did not stand out among the populace there in any large degree. He was not well educated, and he was basically just goofing around, not really doing much, but so were a lot of other people. He was nothing unusual.
Gotcha. What other myths, any other myths that you would like to address?
I've talked for quite a bit. I'd really like somebody else to chime in.
Okay. Let's see. I think there's somebody here who says West Memphis 3. Who is that? Can you talk? Hello? Let's see. I think you're muted. You need to unmute yourself.
Somebody.
Let's see. Let me West Memphis 3 TJ. Who is that?
Is it Truth and Justice?
Yeah, that's you. Is that you?
No, I'm Lisa.
Okay.
I have a question though. They talk about the corruption in the police department. Has anything ever come up about, other corruption, or was anything exposed? Because I can't imagine that in that small town it would have been so important that they've covered everyone.
Gary, anybody? Who's the?
Well, I mean, I know, but I'll give somebody else a chance.
I'm trying to get this one person to unmute this. West Memphis 3 Truth and Justice. Who's that?
There were some investigations involving the drug task force that really had nothing to do with the West Memphis 3 case, except some of the detectives who were involved in the drug task force were involved in some of the investigation of the West Memphis 3 case. And the corruption was they did a lot of big drug bust because of where it is. There's a lot of truck stops there. It's a confluence of two major interstates. And so they did a lot of drug busts there, and there were a lot of drugs flowing through the area, and they had a lot of stuff in the evidence room. And there were some things missing from the evidence room, and they thought that the police had confiscated some drugs, some guns. I know they had those things, and maybe some other things. Had nothing to do with the West Memphis 3 case. It was not some huge huge thing where they'd taken out millions of dollars or something. It was relatively real. It was real, but relatively minor. But there was evidence of corruption, and eventually the state police did come back with a report naming some people who were involved in that. Again, it had nothing to do with the West Memphis 3 case, and it's hard to see how that investigation would somehow play into the actions of the detectives involved in the investigation of the murders.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other? What about? There's a question in the chat about alibis. We know that this is a question that's popping up with the so-called Bob Ruff investigation, but one of the whoppers that was told this week or within the last 7 days was that Jesse Miss Kelly's Bible confession equals an alibi because he clearly states that he was back at the trailer park between 6:30 and 7 on the night of the murders, which then if you look up one of the police officers, Dollar Height said he didn't see him there. But that was an interesting thing. So maybe we can talk about the alibis. Does anybody want to chime? Inca, are you there? If you are, can you unmute your channel? Jason, do you want to chime in or are you just listening? I guess he's just listening. Oh, Roberta Glass made it. Roberta,
yeah, finally.
Am I still on?
Your mic is on, so we can hear you.
Hello?
Yeah? Roberta, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you, and I can semi see like a quarter of your head now. Yeah. All right, we got a question. Bob Ruff said that in the survey, they gave the answers to Damien, and he just agreed with him. Didn't Damien testify in court that those were his words? So that was the initial, I think, the survey that took place May 6th or May 7th. Does that sound right? Does that sound right to you? I think that there is a transcript of that survey.
Would have been the 9th. 8th
or 9th, gotcha.
9th of Sunday. He his source for that is Damien Eccles, and Damien is a proven liar, and we could go into a long list of reasons why I would say that, but it's just a fact. Virtually everything he says is some sort of distortion or lie. Jason's not any better. In fact, he's worse in some respects. But it's hard to believe that the police told Damien Eccles, whenever they were questioning him, and there's no evidence they did this, that, when they asked him how the killer felt, that the police told Damien to say the killer was happy. I mean, it requires a certain mindset to even come up with that kind of answer, particularly, in a serious case like this. And it suggests among all those answers were very suggestive of someone who had, in some cases, he had knowledge that was not known to the general public, such as some of the that one was cut up more than the other, and that they were drowned. All that information was not known to the public. The public had been given a totally different impression from a story that appeared in the Commercial Appeal on Friday. That Friday, that was based on overhearing a state police conversation. I knew the reporter who did that, who heard the thing and did the story, and he was quite good at that sort of thing. But the point being is the information and the broadcast was not correct, and they had all three boys being mutilated. Damien had knowledge that wasn't the case. Then he claimed on the stand that he had read it in the newspaper, and that's how he knew that. So they bring in the newspaper pages and say, look, copies of the newspaper, and say, where did you find this, Damien? And he had to confess that he didn't read it in the newspaper. So where did Damien get that information? Well, Damien got his information from being at the scene and knowing what had been done. And there's really no other good explanation for that. then that's just one example. He I forgot what the question was.
That was the one of the question was, what was Bob Ruff had said that Damien in the survey had gotten his answers from the cops, but there's no evidence of that.
And see, without getting into the big thing about Ruff, the only people that Ruff apparently is talking to are John Mark Byers, David Jacoby, Jason Baldwin. He wanted to talk to Jesse Miskelly, but Miskelly wouldn't talk to him.
Right.
And Damian Eccles. So he's going to the usual suspects in every sense of the word to get their version of the truth. All those guys have been very public in the past about what they think about the case. He's not going to get any new information from them, and he's not going to get any objective information from them. He's not going to learn anything new from them, but he continues to go there and actively resist going and talking to anybody else who might actually know something.
Yeah. I mean, it's remarkable. I guess we'll find out what his interview with Lisa O'Brien went, but it seems like he's kind of trying he seemed a little hesitant in the last two recent podcasts where he's very clear saying it's his opinion, it's my opinion. You know, that sounds like somebody's talking to him.
Well, yes. His breakdown of Damian Eccles' alibis is really somewhat ridiculous in that he had two people that, or actually four people that are more, who were at a casino in Tunica County, Mississippi, that he claims are alibi witnesses. They're not alibi witnesses. He claims that Eccles' families are alibi witnesses. He gives two different stories. Eccles does. He says he was on the phone all evening with these girls. None of the girls, according to their statements to police, said or have ever said they were on the phone with him that evening. In fact, they all, if you look at the record, they all said they didn't talk to him. The last one he talked to was at 4:30 in the afternoon, and he didn't talk to Jennifer Bearden again until not at least 9:20 that night, and it might have been later. She admits later. So the phone call girls are no alibi. Damien's father couldn't say that he was along on the Sanders trip. So it really raises the question: what did he actually know? His mother gave a lot of really incoherent answers about the father leaving the night before, and then no, it wasn't then, it was later, and it's just, she didn't have a lot of credibility. And then Michelle, his sister, said, yeah, he was sitting there watching the 90210 with us over at this friend's house. The little friend there is 12 years old. She said he was there, but how credible is she? And actually, her testimony was discredited because she said it was right before her boyfriend's concert, and it turns out the concert was two weeks or so later. There were two girls across the street that said they saw him going in the house, but it's very questionable whether one of those is even credible at all. And the other one, maybe she is, but she didn't testify in court, so and she has never been challenged in any way. So, I don't know how credible she is. So he has an alibi, but Ruff said he has an alibi.
He has an ironclad alibi 9 people saw, but it's completely different than the alibi that Damien Eccles put up in court, right? I mean, it's incredible. But there's a total there's 2 different alibis.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's amazing.
It's also different from the alibi that he publicly states to this day, that he was talking on the phone to these girls and says, I haven't heard him talk about the visit to the Sanders home in quite a while. I admittedly haven't seen everything he's done, but I don't recall him talking about the visit to the Sanders family.
Yeah, I never.
The phone call girls is easily disproven, so I don't know why he's clinging to that.
Roberta, are you there?
Yeah.
How are you?
Can you hear me?
I hear you very
well.
Great. We've talked about some of the early myths about the case. I don't know how much have you been following us since 4?
Not as closely as I like, because I've been hung up with Google Hangouts.
Gotcha.
Hangouts.
Well, hopefully you've learned it's a little temperamental and not that easy to opt on. So I understand.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're just kind of talking about some of the stuff, taking some questions and stuff like that. But I think that the notion, that's another myth. It really is that Damien Echols had a valid alibi.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting to me, I guess, I come from a different perspective. I thought after watching the documentaries that they were innocent. I didn't know anything else. I didn't have any other information. I thought it was like when they got out of prison, I was like excited for them. I thought like, it had justice has been, it had been righted or whatever. So when I finally looked into the case, I wasn't looking to prove that they were guilty. I was coming from the other side. So, but when you look at all the evidence against them, it all fits. And for the evidence to fit, for them to be innocent, you have to do so many mental gymnastics of forgetting all the confessions, forgetting whatever you think of lie detectors, forgetting that, what are the chances that 3 innocent men have no alibi? What are the chances? It doesn't fit. And I'm surprised. I don't know why I'm surprised, but I always think that a West Memphis 3 supporter will leave me some great comment that will just blow me away with some kind of evidence that I've never thought of. But it's just the same talking points over and over and over and over again. Satanic panic, other stepfathers that are guilty, a hair. I mean, all the things that have just been disproven. It's ridiculous and laughable.
It is. At this point, and this long, the case has gone on. I mean, it's we're at the 25-year point. They're still going over things that are clearly disproven and just repeating it all and over again.
I wish I had a dime for how many times a West Memphis 3 supporter says to me, "Lady, you don't have your facts right," while giving me completely wrong information as an argument.
I've had a complaint
insulting me. Yeah.
I don't like your version of the facts. That's what somebody was. What do you mean?
And they get really mad that I laugh, but it is laughable at this point. How do you say with a straight face that Damien Echols thought he was dying? He was pleading guilty because he was dying in prison of some like bad eyesight and teeth or some like undisclosed illness that's never been revealed. I mean, how do you say that with a straight face? Seriously.
I don't know.
It's laughable, ridiculous. If it weren't sad that a child killer is out with so much support.
So much support, yeah. Yeah, I mean, where do we want to go from here, guys? Do you want to critique Bob Ruff, or what? Do you want to continue with any other additional myths? Is there any myths that we've missed out on? Or how about the myth that the Alford plea is not a guilty plea? Do you want to talk about that myth? I don't know.
That's a great one. And then I think also that they wouldn't let them out if they were that the state of Arkansas really thinks that they're innocent and let them out apologetically, like, "Oh, sorry, don't sue us.
Right.
Yeah.
We're letting you out because you're innocent." That's certainly a big myth. But
how about this myth? They got out saying that they were going to look for the perpetrators from the outside. How's that going on? I'm looking for all of those private investigators hired by Damien Echols and Kate Baldwin that are looking for Terry Hobbs as the possible perp, right?
And they say that over, but you know what I also want to say, another interesting thing about West Memphis 3 supporters? Damien Echols' words are incredibly important until they're not.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I do.
Well, he said he was going to look for the real killer during the press conference, and he could do more from the outside than the inside, and that's why he was taking the plea, and he was dying. And when all that turns out to be a lie, it's not really important anymore. And they hounded you about satanic panic, how you were a victim of satanic panic, until Damien Echols gets out, devotes his entire life to the occult, and now it's just not important.
Right. He's writing a book called High Magic that's due on Halloween,
Exactly. All we're doing is listening to what he's saying. But if it doesn't fit the narrative for West Memphis 3 supporters, it's instantly forgotten.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. Why is there that disconnect? I mean, how many people are listening to Bob Ruff? What part of his audience is actually going to go, this doesn't make any sense, I want to read it for myself, and they're actually going to jump ship? I mean, is that going to happen with the? I've seen a couple people stick their head up above the crowd over on his Facebook or on his Truth and Justice fans page, and man, they got beat down. It was like the nail got sticked up and the hammer got beat down. Like, hold on, I'm starting to think that. I think one of the guys started. I'm starting not to believe this story, and people are like, why? I mean, how many people are going to jump ship?
They should be angry, but I also find it interesting that people ask me for new evidence. That I, as someone who records videos, should go out and find new evidence and forget the court system and forget cross-examination. What someone would tell me, like Joe Schmo on the street in Arkansas, is more important than what someone testified to under oath in court that could be cross-examined. It's such little respect
for hearings, rules of evidence, all this stuff.
Right, exactly.
Doesn't mean anything. No. Judge, Bob Ruff
puts
the court system on like a 4, right? Isn't that how much you trust it? 4 out of 10? Forgot he said something like that.
It's a fantasy, I think the whole Bob Ruff podcast is it's a fantasy podcast,
A related myth is the idea that these supporters were just like Damien when they were teenagers, and he was just a poor, misunderstood teenager who was, full of angst and, didn't get along with his parents.
He's a goth. He's a goth.
Just like every other teenager, and he wasn't. He was somebody who was severely mentally ill. He'd already conceived this idea, according to himself, according to his own story, that he was going to be the world's greatest magician. How many other kids in trailer parks in Arkansas have conceived that as their ambition, life ambition? I would say 0, except for him.
That's a good point. And he was actually in some kind of process of transformation that he was going to eat Kool-Aid packets to facilitate his transformation into a new being. And that is like a sign of like, whoa, guys, can't you key into that? Or can't you understand, like, this is a different level of perception, right? Like, he's having and the whole Rosie thing where he's talking to some discarnate entity, like, this is not your normal kid. It's a myth. You're absolutely right. It's very strange. What did he write in his thing? I'm going to be Satan's henchman and ride into heaven and blow it up in a big ammunition dump. I can't remember the exact quote, but that's where I got the title for my book, Abomination, because he wrote, abominations are taking place on the earth. I'm going to be one of them, right? That's very strange ideation.
It's very strange.
Yeah. Not normal. So that's another myth. He was a normal kid. What normal? Sorry.
I can speak to that because my best friend since the 4th grade is still a West Memphis 3 supporter, and he cried after he watched the documentaries. But he's only on the second one, so he still thinks John Mark Byers did it. So I can.
You're making a very important. Friends. You're making a really important.
And I tell him facts all the time, and it's so emotional to him. It just can't. It's a highly intelligent person. It just can't sink in. It's an emotional connection that film made, and I think it's really powerful when it does connect with people, and that you can't shake it with facts. Sometimes you just can't.
Facts. I'm glad you brought that up because the second one where they both Jason and Eccles put the blame on John Mark Byers, and then now it's Terry Hobbs. So that's another thing that the supporters just cannot grasp, is that they've actually changed their potential perp. It's incredible. They said in that movie, in that second one, they were 100% convinced that it was John Mark Byers. I mean, it's off the charts. Like, you can't figure out that they're changing suspects for a reason. It's amazing.
And the filmmakers paid John Mark Byers to put on that amazing act, and it was an amazing act that some of it was sincerely driven by his emotions, but it was an act he was putting on for the most part for the cameras, and it's amazing to look at, but it's just an act, and he paid a very dear price for all that, and then he became the suspect for years and years and years and years, and then when a single hair shows up that may or may not belong to somebody else. Suddenly he does exactly what was done to him. He goes and points the finger at somebody for which there's no evidence whatsoever. But there was never much evidence against Mark Byers either. He had a pretty darn good alibi for that night from the very start. It would be been very hard, just based on what was known, for him to have pulled that off by himself. In fact, it would have been impossible.
I'm glad you brought that point, Gary, because a lot of people don't know that a lot of these family members are paid or were paid or under contract with HBO, which seriously brings into question their credibility if they're getting paid in a contract. And I've had, through other intermediaries, some of the family members ask for serious money before they ever are interviewed. So I think that it's important for the public, nons or people who are not supporters or whatever, to understand that those last two documentaries were very seriously biased by HBO's involvement in paying some of the family members.
Well, I think it's important to note too that the parents of Michael Moore, Robert Byers, and Stevie Branch, really, I gotta name them pretty often. Let's keep the focus on who was killed in this and who the real victims are. None of the parents wanted to have anything to do with filmmakers after the first film came out, except Mark Byers, who needed the cash.
Who isn't the biological father of son, right? He's not a biological parent.
No, although he shares some DNA, so there's some question about that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, the famous Kershaw knife, the blood in there matched both Chris and John Mark. So the question is how did that actually happen? Since he's the adoptive father, I don't know. I don't know how that happened. And I'm not sure how close what that actually proves or disproves. But he didn't do himself any favors with his testimony, where he was all over the place about what he actually did with the knife. But there's a lot in that movie that makes him look very suspicious if you don't know the facts. I just watched it the other day, and I've been appalled the last two times I watched it about what a piece of just pure propaganda it is. Virtually no facts presented whatsoever. It's all just, it goes right past that and into the emotions.
Good points. Any other questions or anything, guys? We've passed the first hour, so I've slated another hour if you guys want to go another hour. But we've talked about the myths. Anything else? Roberta, do you want to add something? West Memphis 3TL, who's that? You want to add something?
I'd love to hear from some people. Oh, I'm sorry. I'd love to hear from some people that we don't usually hear from.
Hi, I'm just wondering, can anyone hear me?
I hear you perfectly.
Oh, hi, William. This is Inca from West Memphis, the West Memphis 3 pod discussion.
Yes.
I'm listening. I'm very, very interested in everything that everyone has to say in regard to the case, and so much knowledge and experience amongst the people who are present tonight. From my point of view, something I find quite interesting is just taking the Truth and Justice podcast as an example. It's the role of social media in kind of reinventing history, if you like, a kind of revisionist history of the West Memphis 3 case, and I find that quite insidious. And I'm quite surprised by the gullibility of Bob Ruff's audience in terms of just taking everything at face value and perhaps not doing any of their own investigation,
Excellent points. I mean, I think that if you look at, I've done some investigating into Bob Ruff, and apparently his work involving Serial, which garnered him a lot of fame, involved less than honest or investigation with integrity. So I think you're right. I think the gullibility is remarkable.
I think also, though, it's a really good point. It's not just Bob Ruff. It's the New Yorker magazine. It's the New York Times. Every time they print the wrongfully convicted West Memphis 3 I can't tell you how many times. I mean, the New Yorker is the perfect example because they're famous for not even having a comma in the wrong place. But when I tried to, I wrote a letter, a very angry letter, saying, you can't say that they were released on DNA evidence. That's not true. They took an Alford plea. It's a guilty plea. It didn't have to do with DNA evidence. And she said, the journalist said, I'm not going to correct it because that's true for me, sir. I don't know it was just ridiculous. It was, I have the quote somewhere. I have the letter somewhere, but it's close to that, It's true.
Yes,
DNA was involved.
Yes, very, very interesting as well, because in the UK we have the Guardian, and the Guardian has since Paradise Lost, the series was released. The Guardian has referred to Eccles, Baldwin, and Miskelly as innocent men, or as wrongly convicted men. I mean, that is the Guardian, which is a kind of a cornerstone of quality press in the UK.
I mean, it will really show you what PR does when murderers have PR agents. It will really show. So it gaslights the American public. So even if you do look into the facts, what are you going to say? The New York Times is wrong. The New Yorker magazine is wrong. The Guardian is wrong. They're all wrong, and I'm right. I mean, it's a bit of gaslighting.
That's a good point. It's always the same phrase: imprisoned for a crime or convicted for a crime they didn't commit. That's usually the second sentence or the first sentence. And all of those articles.
Which is right out of Eccles' mouth, and I'm sure that's what his attorneys or PR people told him to say. He says,
also, I'm so sorry.
No, please continue.
The personalization of Damien Eccles. I get so many comments. What would you do if you were falsely convicted? I mean, there's like a real emotional association with him. That we're all supposed to feel that he was wrongly convicted. And what would we do? We would plead guilty. We'd all plead guilty. We would all do the same things that he did. And it goes back to the myth that he was just an outcast.
That is true. That's another myth. Outcast. I mean, we kind of discussed that about him being a very peculiar character before. He was arrested. He was peculiar during trial as well. Strange things, strange ideations. I mean, they never really mentioned this, but the George Woods affidavit that's part of the court case in 2000, a guy who I talked to, still around. He didn't want to go on the record with me, but I mean, he said it was amazing things. The ideation of Eccles, he thought he was going to be transported to another universe with the gods, and he still sticks by his opinion. I talked to him within the last year, so that's another part they don't bring up.
Yeah, can I just?
That was a document that was brought up by the defense.
Right.
All this evidence about his mental illnesses, a great deal of evidence about his violence and his hallucinations, his delusions, over many different professionals. It was brought up by the defense.
Yeah, that's a good point. What were you going to say, Inka?
I was just thinking that it's quite strange that Damien Eccles appeared to be in a kind of altered state during his trial, and didn't seem to be particularly concerned about the outcome. But the really bizarre thing is that, of course, Eccles believed at that time and still does in reincarnation. So perhaps Eccles thought, well, if he gets the death penalty, that's not going to make very much difference because he's going to be, he's going to be reincarnated. And of course, he's released 18 years later from jail, and he writes a book. And what's it called? Life After Death. It's rather. I find that quite ironic.
Didn't he write that in his suicide note that he would be reincarnated?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah.
I think another idea that's been. This is more from Bob Ruff than the world in general, but he's been heavily promoting this idea, pushing this idea that Jesse Miskelly has these great alibis and this parade of great alibi witnesses, and the three police officers were lying. And if we just believe Stephanie Dollar and Fred Revell and and Dennis Carter and all his little friends from the trailer park, which he apparently does, then, we should be aware that Jesse, too, has got this airtight, ironclad alibi, and it's just not so. It's not even close.
Yeah. Oh no, it's amazing. So, what else? I mean, maybe we should spend the next, few minutes talking about Bob Ruff's, some specifics about Bob Ruff's analysis of this case. I mean, the last weekend was a real whopper for me. But would anybody like to comment on Truth and Justice?
I would.
Go for it.
I think I have a theory. This is my theory. I can't prove it because I don't know Bob Ruff or the ins and outs, but my theory is that he lost a lot of credibility when he picked Don as the killer of Hae-Min Lee, and he thought that the West Memphis 3 would be a slam dunk case, and who wouldn't think that with the press that they get and the support that they have? So he went into this thinking that this would really solidify him and legitimize him, and he found it not such a easy road to hoe, and that's why he's bailing out of it. That's my theory.
That makes sense. I mean, how soon? He keeps saying he's going to bail out of it. When is it going to actually take place?
Well, just as soon as as far as he can go before he has to actually prove anything. He just has to put out a lot of question marks.
that's probably
that's because who is he going to pick if he's not going to pick? I really thought he was going to go with Jacoby.
Same with me
and Hobbs. But you can't pick Jacoby, and you can't really have Hobbs. What is Hobbs doing there with a candle and controlling all those kids? And the Clemente brothers didn't really give him a lot of support, so it's really tough to put together.
Yeah, no, Clemente did not help him with this case. Yeah, I mean, it's just going to be an unsub, huh? He's just going to end up and use the word unsub, and that'll be it.
Mr. Bojangles.
Yeah, Mr. Bojangles is it. I mean, I think he's in deep trouble. He's going to have a tough time extricating himself, because if he really tries to exonerate them in some legal forum, that's just going to be rough. I think that he's probably anticipating that's going to be a tough way to go.
It's just about impossible. Today, in his Friday follow-up today, he said that he threw out some more hints about what he was going to do, but he doesn't have a lot of credibility about his plans going forward, because he's so unclear about what's involved, what he's going to do. He did say he was going to finish up the case, but I don't know that anybody's going to hold him to that. I mean, who could? He said he had interviews with Damian Eccles, Jason Baldwin. He hoped to talk to Dan Stidham. He's going to put Lisa O'Brien, which should be a really good interview. Probably the best thing that you're going to hear all season, with Lisa, who really knows her stuff on the case. This Sunday, and maybe over the next 2 episodes. And he said he was going to air all these interviews he had with Damian, Jason, Dan Stidham, if you could get him, and Mark Byers and Jacoby. And except for Jacoby, all the rest of those guys, I mean, they're not going to say anything we haven't heard 100 times before. I don't know what the point of those interviews would be. I mean, I could see why you'd want to interview him, but we're not going to learn anything from him airing them, not really. Except just the same old bull.
Yeah. Roberta, do you want to make a comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that people forget that this was a death penalty case. And for some West Memphis 3 supporters who are against the death penalty, they could just make up as many lies as they wanted to, because they felt that the ends justified the means, meaning they felt that nobody should die via the death penalty. So it didn't matter what they said. So when you get into the nuts and bolts of the case, there's a ton of evidence against them. It's not like this is not like a even close case.
Yeah, I mean, if you really look at the evidence, it's clear to me, they got the right people. If anybody finds a copy of this book, Hermetic Reiki, Mind Magic, can you send it to me? No, I'm serious. It's an underground book. There's no copy. I can't find it available. But make sure you have the right title, because there's other Hermetic Reiki books. So anyway, I've been trying to get a copy of this. Have you seen a copy of this, anybody? Mind Magic?
No. There's probably like 10 copies printed in Salem.
Yeah, that's it. Some kind of Salem thing.
Signed in his blood.
Oh, no, probably wouldn't be surprised. Would not be surprised.
You would be the first person I would send it to, William Ramsey.
Well, what I haven't seen recently is him tattooing anybody. I don't know if you guys will follow with that whole thing where he was tattooing people with like this kind of his own sign and an X. You guys seen this whole thing? I guess he hasn't been doing it since he left.
He's giving up being an artist, and maybe that's part of his art.
Gotcha.
He's having basically a fire sale of wonderful art.
Yeah. One of the interesting things about this case was that Bob Ruff didn't know about the whole pentagram on the chest of Damien Echols, that he didn't know that. It was mentioned in the court case. And I thought it was interesting the way that Echols kind of addressed it when he was asked by Bob, oh, yeah, I've got a cross on my chest and, this thing. You guys see this picture? That up?
Yeah. Can I say something about the tattooing?
Please.
Well, in New York City, it was illegal to get a tattoo for a long time because of the AIDS crisis. So when I got my tattoo, it was like, in a guy's house in the Bronx, 1992 or something. So it's heavily regulated. So I don't think New York State, is taking too kindly to unlicensed people just randomly tattooing people. It's, a whole process. That's my theory on it. That's
interesting. I wonder what that is. Have you guys ever seen this picture of Echols? This is from the court case. I don't think I've seen it in any book where somebody got a picture of him in all black with the pentagram necklace. You guys ever seen this one?
Yes.
No.
Yeah, that's another one of those kind of court cases. I also have a black briefcase that was supposedly not in court records, or not. I think that Ruff overlooked it or wasn't aware of it. That is actually in the records as well. Let's see if I can find that. That picture was taken, I think, before the murders.
Yeah, probably so.
Here's the briefcase.
There was a briefcase in Dominy's room. You can see it in the picture of Dominy's room. In fact,
see it right there? There's the Exorcist.
Yeah. But not much was made of that. I'm assuming you didn't.
There was something in the records that they carried drugs around in the black briefcase. Do you remember that? And there was pictures of the kids, or like there's a story from one person about the guys would keep pictures of people inside the briefcase. Do you remember that one?
Yes,
Miss Kelly.
Yes, that's right. Miss Kelly, yes. Yeah. Yes, I do remember that. Miss Kelly said that in one of his statements. And he mentioned a gun and some drugs in the briefcase.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And a photo of the three boys.
Yes,
correct.
And among many other things you could read, when you look at the confessions, if you listen to Ruff, you would think that Miss Kelly was just agreeing to whatever the police were saying. Well, no, he corrected things through there, and one of the things he corrected was the suggestion that there was more than one photo, and he said no, it's just one photo. And so, but he was very consistent about that one photo being in this briefcase. That kind of detail popped up in somebody else's story as well. And then one of the more peculiar things in the case was the persistent presence of this character that Echols supposedly called Lucy.
Yes.
And he's mentioned by not just a few people, but quite a few of the people that were privy to this sort of information he was hanging around with. But the police seemingly could never find this guy, and every physical description they had of him, he looked completely. None of the physical descriptions matched in any fashion Miss Kelly said he looked like Damien, except he had a beard.
Oh.
At one point, I was wondering if he was Joe, but Joe Hutchison. But I'm that's just rank speculation on my part. I mean, they do sort of look alike. I mean, father and son, but I don't want to dwell too much on that because that is just a wild guess at the best.
Yeah, I've always speculated. I've wondered who that was in that community as well. But like the Alvis Clem Bly statement, the recorded statement of him is really terrifying, but also verifies a lot of stuff that went down in Stonehenge that Bob Ruff won't touch with a 40-foot pole. All this kind of art and spray painting and stuff that went on before the murders, things that led up to the murders,
Right. There was also some disturbing reports of Eccles stalking people and young girls. And, most of that came out after he was arrested, but the initial report, the best initial report came before the arrest. They just didn't, the teenage girl that reported this didn't name him because she was scared of him, which makes perfect sense.
Well, there was another family that went into, left a police report with West Memphis 3 that said he was in the bushes stalking their kids when they were out front. Do you remember that one?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
That's exactly right. And the buyers had some report. Mark and Melissa both testified that they had somebody in dark clothing that took pictures of their son out in front of the house one Sunday when they were on to Flash Market or something. And they never said it was Eccles for sure. And I don't know any way they could actually have verified that. And perhaps it was perfectly innocent. I don't know. But the whole thing was very strange.
Yeah. Any other comments by anybody about this Bob Ruff's investigation?
I just wonder, my question would be, is it really going to end? Is it paused? And I understand from the podcast today, Ruff suggested that it was going to be paused for an indefinite amount of time. And I just wonder if it's going to pick up or if it's just going to fizzle out and kind of fade away, Is it actually going to come back? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think he first said it was going to pause, 3 or 4 weeks ago. So I don't know what's going to happen. If anybody can figure out what this hand sign he's doing is, send it to me. But I've seen some other people make this gesture. I don't know what's going on with this one.
William Ramsey, you were really right. You said he was giving himself enough rope to hang himself, and you were right.
Yeah, he's not going to be able to come back from this. I don't think anybody who with a knowledge of the case. I mean, this last one was a shocker that Jesse's Bible, confession made it an alibi. Just. Well,
I knew he was going to just say it was one confession. I mean, let's just talk about that.
Well, good point.
You can't talk about 6 confessions.
Yeah, you just have to.
He goes into all this minute detail about all this stuff that doesn't matter, but 6 confessions. Let's just concentrate on the one, famous one, coerced one, quote unquote. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, I really thought he was going to be able to. If you think about it, if you can make up as much evidence as you want and sort of magnify things and omit other things, I thought he was going to make a kind of Frankenstein type, case and really be able to pull something together. Because I thought he was going to pull another Don, but I was wrong. So there you go.
Happen. Yeah. So we'll see. I don't know how he's going to shut it off and keep his listeners.
Yeah, it's particularly bizarre that he wanted to use the Bible confession as the authoritative source on this police visit, but he wants to totally write off all the that confession and all the other confessions as totally irrelevant. He actually claimed he's claimed repeatedly that there's only really one true confession, and that was the first confession. And then, and that wasn't really a confession because it was obviously it was a coerced confession with a lot of leading questions. And then when Tim Clemente said that, this sounds like a follow-up to an earlier confession, which is exactly what it was. Ruff really didn't have a whole lot to say. He ended up, sort of peddling there, hoping you could tell he was just sort of hoping he could get through this interview with Clemente without doing too much damage to himself. And
that's what it seemed like.
He managed to do that anyway.
I think he should rename his podcast, the Forgotten Five, meaning the Forgotten Five Confessions of Miss Kelly.
Right. Yeah, that was an interesting one, that whole subtitle of the Forgotten West Memphis 3. Like, what are you talking about?
How insulting is that? Really?
Yes, that was terrible. That was terrible. Really bad.
I mean, we're not supposed to be outraged. We're not supposed to be outraged. And we're not supposed to think the things that are laughable are laughable. It's strange to me that West Memphis 3 supporters, they have no answer to why Jesse Miskelly confessed so many times in so many uncoerced environments. And secondly, why he doesn't do more interviews, why it's always Eccles out in the front and Baldwin, and Miskelly's kind of never around, never wants to talk. Why is that? It all fits. That's what I mean when I say all the evidence against them fits as to what we know how human beings act. In my experience on planet Earth, it all fits. And to make it fit the other way, you have to do so many contortions and assume people act, in ways they don't act.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, I don't understand how this farce is going to continue. I don't get it. What else should we cover? Anybody have any ideas? We've got about another half an hour left.
Well, I just saw a little message on here, but about, to me, some of the most heinous thing that Ruff has done was that awful interview with Dawn Moore.
Yeah.
Totally pointless. It was airing of a lot of dirty laundry, and really it was kind of from an aggrieved adult child who was in a conflict with her parents over some things, and it didn't contribute anything to the investigation whatsoever. And the whole thing was it was embarrassing to listen to, and really angered me because it's just simply unfair to have this one-sided interview thrown up there for no other purpose than just to incite the listeners into thinking I don't know what the point of it was, but they, come to some new conclusions about things. I don't know what those would be. And, it calls to mind that these parents, and this is something that really gets to me, and really a lot of my my impetus all along, is these parents have been really betrayed by everyone. About the parents of the victims, been betrayed by everyone from the get-go, except the prosecution and the police. But these filmmakers use them, and then when they actually see the film, they see their sons' bodies is in one of the very first scenes out for everybody to see in the most appalling manner. And and they were sickened by this. How do you think that made them feel to see that out for the world to see, and see their sons degraded and used in that way? It's sickening. It makes me so. I'm sorry, I'm getting angry now. And it's a touch point for me. And Ruff is perfectly willing to do the same sort of thing with something like the Dawn Moore interview, to exploit this pain and hurt that these parents have had for just to get some listeners to listen to his podcast. It's disgusting.
Yes, I totally agree, Gary. I think it really is disgusting.
Guys, there, go ahead and continue, please.
Yes, it's just it's coming back to a point I made earlier in connection with social media. I really do think that social media lacks the ethics of journalism, because I know Gary's talking as a trained journalist, and he finds that behaviour very reprehensible. But I think podcasters can get away with things that broadcasters and journalists can't, because there's no regulation of podcasts, if you know what I mean.
Well, yeah, journalism isn't really regulated, but it was self-regulating for a long time by the fact that it would willingly own up to it, and at least in the States, they would willingly own up to their own mistakes by printing corrections, acknowledging errors.
Yeah.
Ruff does not do that. He may, in passing, say, well, maybe I misstated this, and he did it today about something. Yeah, I may have misstated this, but, and then he blah, 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 blah. And instead of owning up to the fact that he just simply gets things wrong, and he gets things wrong that are unforced errors, he doesn't have to say the things that he says, but instead he just goes ahead and says it anyway, and then he should be having to go back and correct it himself and setting the record straight, but he doesn't do that. He just moves on.
Yes.
And it's very disturbing to me, because it just violates not just journalism, but just the rules of credibility. If you want to build credibility with people, you have to be honest and truthful, and sometimes you often have to be honest and truthful with yourself, and he's not able to do that.
Yeah.
Hey, Gary, can you moderate for about 10 minutes, Gary? I'll be back in just a second. I got to run some around. Just moderate for 10 minutes.
Okay, no problem. Okay, somebody else chime in now.
I was just going to say, I don't quickly that the form, that podcast, who needs credibility when you get more listeners? And in true crime, you have these podcasts, they want to create mystery and doubt to keep people listening. So credibility is less important sometimes to some podcasters than listeners. And you see that. I was listening to another podcast about Heather Elvis, which is a case that I've followed closely. And they were just saying unknown sources say this and that. It's not a case with a lot of super mystery, but bringing up, just not even hearsay, rumors as new evidence. So it's a real kind of disregard for our legal system and how evidence is really presented and created and cross-examined.
Well, Roberta, you do a podcast. Do you feel constrained by ethics, self-imposed rules, etc.?
I couldn't live with myself if I presented but I don't have an investigatory type podcast. I have a kind of critical podcast of court cases. It's a little bit different because I'm not an investigator. I'm not out doing interviews, of people involved in a case that's, I don't know. I'm not looking to exonerate people in that way, in that manner. You know what I mean? Taking people step by step through a case. It's really different, but I think the public is now expecting it from Serial, that you go and you investigate it. And in a way, a journalist investigates it is a little bit different. And what people say to a journalist is different than what they'd say under oath. And I can't remember, I think in the judge who was involved in the Serial case called cross-examination, the engine of truth. I mean, it's true. I mean, you look at the Oscar Pistorius case as a perfect example. If anybody watched him get cross-examined, and his entire story crumbled in minutes under cross-examination. And Eccles, same thing as far as this alibi. Yes, he can say, I was talking on the phone to Bob Ruff, but it falls apart under cross-examination on the stand,
Right. And no witnesses were presented to build the case that he was talking to anybody on the phone, except his parents, who were describing conversations they supposedly were hearing in the next room, but they didn't know who he was really talking to. Are you back, William?
I'm back. Yes, I am. This is a picture that we were talking about earlier of two people who made a statement to the police saying they saw Eccles in this bush taking pictures of their daughter. So this is from the case files. Not a lot of people mentioned this about the case, but this is one of the pictures that was in the West Memphis Police. Maybe both of you, Gary, can you tell the audience your books and what you've written about the West Memphis 3? And then Roberta, can you also talk about your podcast, please?
Well, I originally last year I put out 2 books. I originally intended to write 1 book, but I ended up writing 2 books. The first was Blood on Black, and the second is Where the Monsters Go. And that basically covered this case in some detail. And it was as long as it was because I wanted to cover everything. I spent the last year or so condensing those down into a book that's maybe a third of the size of the original book. It's at least half the size, maybe a third of the size of the original books, and called The Case Against the West Memphis 3 Killers, which is pretty much a self-explanatory title. They're both available on Amazon. I worked briefly at the Commercial Appeal in Memphis for many, many years, and I worked in West Memphis, worked for the West Memphis Evening Time as a managing editor from 2010 to 2014. So I know the area pretty well.
Awesome. And then Roberta, you on your podcast, you solved the West Memphis 3 case. Can you talk about your podcast?
That is correct. I have a short video that's called West Memphis 3 Solved, and it's, I guess, my most watched video.
Gotcha.
So, and I have a few other videos about Damien Eccles and his cult-like followers, and talking a little bit about J.T. Leroy and other cases, and but many about the West Memphis 3.
You have this case that I have posted up here on the video, which is Amanda Knox with Damien Eccles. So you've done an Amanda Knox, and the title is the Wolf Sheep Podcast. Is that right? Or
Yeah. Yep.
Gotcha. Seems fitting because Eccles wrote in his psych records. What did he say? Wolves eat sheep, or something like that.
Yeah. It comes up a lot. It also came up in the Menendez case. Comes
really?
up a lot with killers identifying as wolves, and the people are just sheep.
Gotcha.
But I find that oftentimes that the followers or the fans of these murderers have some sheep-like characteristics.
Interesting. Makes sense. Yeah, I recommend the podcast and Gary Meece's books. What else?
I would I would recommend your book highly too. It's very good.
Thank you very much.
Also available on
fine bookstores everywhere. This is an interesting one. This picture of them with John Douglas, and Damien Eccles has this black dragon tattoo on his arm. That's a cult tattoo, and on the table is a couple tarot decks. And John Douglas is just sitting there chatting along. Supposedly has a lot of respect. And it's interesting just to bring up kind of the experts that Bob Ruff mentions. He almost deifies these kind of paid experts like Douglas and Werner Spitz. I mean, I just fell out of my chair when he was talking about them, as if they were objective, honest people. So they're just something else. You guys want to comment on the experts or anything? Anybody know much about Werner Spitz?
He's a single bullet theorist of the, JFK, which tells me all I need to know. And also, someone just argued with me about that. Someone just left me a comment about how I don't have my facts straight about the wounds, that they never said that all the wounds came from turtles. And then you cut to Werner Spitz's, his report, and it's all the wounds came from turtles, including, he's talking about,
Well, they both two of the boys had severe cranial wounds, right? Which means that the pre-Neolithic snapping turtles carried sticks or something, right? I mean,
right. And And the bleeding, how they bled to death, and meaning that they ate them alive. I mean, it's just crazy.
Crazy, right? So, I mean, that's another of the contradictions of Ruff's investigation is that he says it's all done by turtles, but the Byers kid who, yeah, you're right. It just doesn't want. It's contradiction. It's a blatant contradiction.
But then when they're wrong, it doesn't matter.
Right?
It's not important.
Not important. Contradictions don't matter. And if I remember correctly, when Spitz made his statement in this kind of pseudo public relations thing that involved Douglas and the lawyer Reardon, I could have swore he had said that he agreed with everything that Peretti and the other guy came up with. He just had a different interpretation. Do you guys remember Spitz saying that? Because if that's the case, that means that it's even worse for Ruff's interpretation of that. If Spitz says, well, I think it's a different interpretation.
I don't.
I think that he said that. I got to go find that.
One of the things he, speaking of Peretti, today he did qualify his understanding of the Peretti testimony to clarify that he understood that Peretti was basically forced into setting this possible, based on the forensic evidence, that the time of death was between 1 and some other time in the early morning. And of course, Peretti was forced into that based on these forensic parameters that he said actually just really didn't apply. But since he was forced to testify to that effect, that's what he testified to. But Ruff had earlier suggested that John Fogelman, the assistant prosecutor, had tried to persuade the jury through deception by using later times to push the time of the death back that would get closer to the Peretti testimony. Well, if you actually look at what Fogelman actually said in his closing argument, he said that the time of death was between, I think, 6:30 and 8, more than likely, which is the same time that he'd said all along. There was no pushing back on the time. He basically just simply misrepresented what Fogelman said. This is bound to have been pointed out to him. It certainly was discussed on these various pages, Facebook pages, and he makes no attempt to correct this sort of thing. He just lets it stand. He allowed these readers to write in and suggest that maybe one of the Hollingsworth family, the Anthony Hollingsworth, that maybe he was a viable suspect. Because and that Richard Simpson, who was L.G. Hollingsworth's friend, was maybe a viable suspect. And today it was who was it that might be? A scout leader. Is he going to look into the scout leaders and see if maybe they might be involved? This is dangerous. It's irresponsible, and it's laughable. I mean, except the only thing is that there are real people who are being pointed at, and some of these people are still living, and they're being pointed at as if they might be potential suspects, and they're not. They never have been. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's irresponsible. Yeah, really irresponsible.
Grossly irresponsible.
But don't you think it also comes from a larger, I don't know, sort of a view of life when you take on these innocent positions of convicted murderers? People who support one murder are more likely to support another, and that even if they really are really guilty, it doesn't matter so much because our justice system is so terrible, and they have no respect for law enforcement or, the legal system. So they put themselves in the position of a rebel, sort of a persona that goes along with these innocent type podcasts. Am I being too confusing? Or
no, not at all. No, it's true. I think it's actually an interesting. I bet all these people who listen to Bob Ruff think that Making of a Murder, that guy Avery's innocent, that Knox is innocent, that Adnan Syed is innocent. that Eccles is innocent, that all these people have been railroaded and they're different, and all the incriminating evidence is fake. So if Ed Ensign writes "I want to kill," or Knox is prevaricating, or Avery has his fingerprint on one of his car, on the car of the girl that was murdered, it's all a setup. It's all the cops are doing. So I think that it's scary to think that there's a significant proportion of the population that will herd together, and I do think that a lot of the people they lack the facility or capacity to engage in critical analysis where they can actually pick something up and read it themselves. And I think that once people actually start reading things associated with all those cases, they'll realize that these people are not the innocent white doves they're portrayed as.
Also, a documentary is looked at as a documentary, but really these documentaries were pieces of entertainment, how to entertain, not as so much. Some documentaries really are out to inform and some are out to entertain, and it gets in a tricky, and some to do both, but this is a really tricky situation where people can't believe that they would be lied to by a documentary.
True. It's true.
It should be informative.
I think that that's the Hollywoodization, or this kind of drift from the integrity that a lot of these producers and creators are looking at the bottom line. They've got to sell product for the cost that they've spent, so they're going to create, fake narratives or create things that discrepancies or bring up interesting. And it goes back to serial. It's not just the documentaries; it's the podcast too. They've got to come up with an interesting hook to get people in. And,
right. There was a brief series on that's still on Netflix called Evil Genius, which was really quite interesting. And I was really taken with it, and I thought it was really well done. And then I read some stories about it, and it said that one of their inspirations was the Paradise Lost movies. And I'm thinking, that movie is being used as a parody. I was kind of disappointed to hear that movie in this case is used as a paradigm for all these other cases. I mean, it is sort of the gold standard that people go back to, and it's not really a gold standard, but that is how it's viewed. This is the original documentary that really opened the doors of justice to all these poor innocent people who are being thrown into death row for no good reason except they were wearing black T-shirts and listening to my.
Scary, man. It's really kind of scary.
I wasn't surprised by that because I loved Evil Genius, but at the end, I don't want to spoil it, but there is an innocence, slant at the end to exonerate the bomber himself. And the investigators are like, no, there's so much evidence that they don't go into. Besides the, Jessica Hoopsick's word, right. Again, not under oath, in the middle of the night, filmed for whatever reason, to make the family happy, I guess. So, I wasn't surprised when I read that it was inspired by Paradise Lost movies, because there is that angle to it. Of we know better. We as documentarians know better than the FBI who looked into this, and the evidence that they put together.
I got a question from the chat, and it's a great question. Look at all the sponsors that Bob Ruff has. He has very, reputable businesses, Omaha Steaks, etc., who he is advertising for, while doing what I believe, in my opinion, is a disingenuous treatment of the facts. I mean, what are your guys' thoughts about these sponsorships? How much money is he bringing in, and why don't they have a more critical analysis of what's going on in this whole Bob Ruff situation? Anybody want to comment on that?
Well, it'll show you how little we care about victims in this country. A sponsor won't attach themselves to anyone controversial, but these sponsors of someone who says they're doing a podcast for the victim, but really when he's out to exonerate twice convicted triple child killers, you would think that would someone they wouldn't want to put their name behind, but no props.
That's a really great point. Yeah, it's remarkable. There was a time I think Eccles was invited to some convention or something sponsored by FedEx, and they pulled the plug on him. I think somebody complained or things like that. There was another one where
it was FedEx in Memphis.
Yes, that's right.
I was I wrote some stories about that at the time.
Okay. I was
and the fact is that, you know, the news stories, there are enough people in Memphis who believe that he indeed killed these children, that that the idea that he's just this innocent guy who just was thrown into jail for no good reason just doesn't wash with them. And there was a huge backlash, and FedEx backed out of it.
I remember that's one example of a corporate sponsor.
They were perfectly willing to do it before, though. Before any of the backlash, they were perfectly willing to have him on because they just, you know, they didn't study the case. They just thought this would be great to have this innocent guy giving this talk.
Yeah, I remember calling a bookstore and saying, you know, where Eccles was reading from his book and saying, you know, that guy wasn't exonerated. You know, he's a convicted child killer. He's on parole. You know that, right? And they were like, no, we don't know that. Really? You're a child killer. So Gary's right. You know, people don't know.
Well, there was another.
They ride on the PR.
Yeah.
It's enough people think, you know, he's enough innocence. And did you look at the Innocence Project page where they describe the false confession of Jesse Misskelley, and they go through how it's a textbook example of a false confession?
No, I didn't know. I didn't see that.
Yeah, it's a whole. I'll send it to you. It's like a whole page. And so the Innocence Project, which is a revered, you know, organization, has no trouble putting out false information.
They put out that false information, but they won't take them as an Innocence Project case. That should say something. So they probably did their homework and went, "Whoa, I don't think we can win this," especially if they have already signed an Alford plea, you know. But one other case was another one. If you remember the Yoga Works fiasco, Magic on the Mat out here in L.A., I don't know if you guys remember that thing, but he was working with, you know, kind of a well-known yoga teacher. Her name was Korn or something, and he was going to do Magic on the Mat thing, yoga magic, and that was another one that got canceled. Yoga Works said, "Whoop, this guy's convicted," and they pulled the plug on that. And
William Ramsey, how dare you misrepresent that? That was That was postponed due to scheduling conflicts. Now, please,
indefinitely postponed. So that was, you know, so people
I'm kidding. You know what I mean? I think they put out some kind of statement like that. They'll never say that the guy's like a triple child killer and it's scary. They just, you know, cancel it because of whatever. You know what I mean?
If you want to see how this kind of how people can change and flip, there was one where there's a video on YouTube of this woman, Korn, restating the whole fake narrative. These three guys were wearing black shirts. They got arrested. They were thrown in jail for a crime. And she just repeated. And then all of a sudden, the whole thing got canceled. And then she put another one out saying, well, Damien Echols is a special guy, a beautiful person. And beautiful people is like a code word. You know, Manson uses it like if you're, you know, in the occult or something like that. So she got the gist of what's going on and changed her tune. She was telling a real different story after that got canceled. But there are pictures of them before the cancellation where she's got his hand on his chest in some kind of semi-romantic look. I can put this.
Yeah, but the yoga class itself is amazing. Of Damien Echols teaching the class, sharing his great wisdom with the class while they're doing yoga. It is one of the creepiest pieces of footage I've ever seen. You know, and women. It was mostly women in a women's space, and having a child killer lead it. It really, really, it's like a killer gynecologist or something. You know?
Nauseous.
Speaking of the Innocence Project, though, you know, indeed, specifically DNA, I don't think it could be emphasized enough that the three killers had the opportunity to present new evidence. We're going to have the new opportunity to present new evidence to the courts and have their case reviewed and possibly get new trials. And that was within, even if they bumped it back a year or two, it was not going to be, you know, as court cases tend to go. Maybe it wouldn't have happened that December, but they stood a very good chance of getting new trials ordered, and with some possibility, considering of things, unproven allegations of juror misconduct, which really doesn't speak to their guilt at all. But
Yeah.
Anyway, there was a good possibility they were going to get new trials and maybe get exonerated. And instead of that, they chose their defense team goes to the prosecution, to Scott Ellington, who was new on the job, who was not a veteran prosecutor, as I've heard him referred to at some point. He'd been an assistant prosecutor for 4 years or so, and he had offered this idea of this Alford plea just to make things easy on everybody, and honestly, it was an easy way out for them, for the state. They were perfect. Scott Ellington was perfectly willing to bear the criticism because he was getting criticism every day anyway, and from all the people who claimed he was these kids were innocent. These men, they're not kids. And but if they actually had good DNA evidence, why wouldn't they have taken it to the courts and shown it? And why have they not released this new evidence since? I mean, it's there. There's no law prohibiting them from sharing with the world that if they have this exonerating evidence. I haven't seen it yet, and neither has anybody else.
Right. Well, that's a great point, because this whole thing about Terry Hobbs's hair has been bandied about, but why hasn't a third party been able to take a look at that? Right? Has a third party ever confirmed that so-called hair is actually in existence?
No.
So, yeah, see, that's the whole thing. So this is it's just like a phantasm. It's a mirage. Where's the so-called hair and then obviously, and then they distort. They say publicly, "Oh, it's the hair of Terry Hobbs." But, so that's a very telling point. You make a great point there, Gary. But we are coming close to the end. We're at 4 minutes down, left till 6 o'clock. Do you guys want to add anything else, Gary? Go check out Gary's books on Amazon. Roberta Glass's podcast. Anything else, Gary?
No, except I would encourage everybody to listen in this Sunday and hear. I would ordinarily not suggest you tune into Bob Ruff, but this Sunday, if he's actually going to have Lisa O'Brien on there, that should be a great interview. I did an interview with Lisa on her show a month or two ago, and she is very, very knowledgeable about this case. Excellent. And it should be a great interview. Thank you.
What's Lisa O'Brien's podcast name? Is it? Remember?
Clear and Convincing.
Clear and Convincing.
Check that out as well. Gary Meece, thank you so much for spending time today. Roberta, would you like to add anything?
No, it's been a real pleasure. I love talking about this stuff. So
thank you guys. Thanks everybody for joining us. Hopefully you got some good information. There were 3 different question feeds on the Hangout. There's a Hangout at YouTube and Facebook, so it was hard to keep up with everything, but maybe we can do it again sometime in the future. Thank you all for being on the show. Have a good night.